So the way we understand this when we talk about Amalek as a klipa is that Reish is Goyim Amalek. The first of all the nations Amalek means that Amalek is a kind of a klipa that it leads to all other negative klipas. In other words, the reason why it's not part of the seven, after all, the seven include all seven character traits. So any kind of negative character trait that one could possibly have, it should be included in these seven. But Amalek is not part of it because Amalek is actually the root and the source and the core that leads to all seven. So that's one thing we need to explain. How is that? And the second thing is when he says, Achrisei Adar, which means his end will be everlasting destruction. What does that mean? It means that all the nations of the world when Mashiach comes will be transformed. We learn this in the Rambam, we see this in the prophecies, and we say it every day. And those who daven 3 times a day say it 3 times a day in the prayer of Aleinu L'Shabeach, where we say that all the nations of the world, all their idols will be destroyed, and they will all bow down to Hashem, and they will all accept Hashem, and they'll recognize Hashem. And in that day, Hashem's name will be one, and the whole world will accept him. The whole world, all the nations, except for one, except for Amalek. Amalek will be completely destroyed. So we're going to explain why. So in the booklet, there's a mimer from the Rebbe Rashab. It's a long mimer, but we're going to cover just one part. It's one of those mimer that we don't have a translation in English. So I'm going to try to read it and to read it slowly so you could follow. And we'll just learn this part that explains why this is.
Where is it?
It's page 25 in the booklet. And it's a mimer that the Rebbe Rashab said, Tov Reish Samachei. Tov Reish Samachei is almost 120 years ago. In the English, this is 19. Is it 19 or no, 19? Yeah. No, it's in the 1800s still, the late 1800s. No, it's 1995, 1905. This is the year 1905. To understand a hefresh, what is the difference between Amalek, the Chol HaGoyim, and all the other nations? The Chol HaGoyim, all the other nations, Yisbareru will be elevated, Soif Kol Sof, ultimately, V'yuchlo b'Kedusha, they will become included in Kedusha. U'Kamesh Kosev, as it says, Oz Epech El Amim, Safa Brura. Then, meaning in that day when Mashiach comes, the nations in the world will be transformed to speak in a clear language. Dikrei Kulam B'Shem Hashem. They will all call in the name of Hashem, which means they'll all recognize Hashem. That's all the nations, except one nation, which is Amalek. Amalek Ein Le Birur V'Tikun. There's no tikkun, no way of correcting the klip of Amalek. Achrisei Adar Dafka. He has to be eliminated completely. So now he's going to explain on a personal level. We have within us a klipa that can be transformed. And we have within us a klipa that can be transformed, it has to be eliminated completely. What is it? In Yadua, the Chol HaGoyim, all the nations of the world, even the 7 nations, which they are sort of the root of all other nations, Aknani, Achiti, Chulu, etc. They are the other side, the opposite side of the Midas, which means, Just like there are character traits in Kedusha. There's love for Hashem, and there's fear of Hashem, and there's compassion, and all the other character traits. So too, yesh midas the l'umazeh. Vein zayim paras atevis zayim paras arois. In the dream of Parah, he saw 7 cows, 7 good cows, healthy cows. Then he saw 7 bad cows that were thin and weak and sick-looking. So, according to Chassidus, this is the difference between the 2 sets of cows. The 7 good cows that he saw represent the 7 character traits of Kedusha. The 7 bad cows that he saw represents the same 7 character traits, but in Klippa. Shalzeh Omer Azal, and a reference to these character traits, our sages said, Ein Adam Ever Aveira Elam Kein Nichens Beiruch Shtus. A person would not violate the Torah, wouldn't do an Aveira, unless a spirit of Shtus, a spirit of nonsense, took him over. In other words, every Yid in his right mind wouldn't do an Aveira. But when he does an Aveira, it's as if at that moment he's overcome with some sort of a craziness that just gets him. Not the kind that would be, would be analyzed clinically, that he's not fit and it's not his fault. It means a spiritual ruach shtus that takes over and causes him to sin. What's the ruach shtus? Ein hamidus rois. This is the negative character traits. Shemechasim al emes. They cover up the emes, that a person shouldn't feel the truth of what is really happening when he does Naveira. It appears to him that he's still holding on to his Yiddishkeit, and there's nothing changing. He doesn't become separate and separated from Hashem by doing an Aveira. In other words, there's a thought in his head that doing Aveira doesn't make him less connected to Hashem than if he doesn't do an Aveira. He doesn't feel that. In his mind, it doesn't mean anything. If a person would know the truth, that he becomes separated, that every Aveira is in some way severs that bond, that connection between me and Hashem, it as it is really in truth. As this is found in Tanya, in Perik Chavvav 26, the Alter Rebbe explains this point. What does the Alter Rebbe explain? That we see that people give up their life not to disconnect from Hashem. So if somebody was told that either has to declare his loyalty to another religion, or he's going to lose his life, so they're ready to lose their life. So how come he's not ready to lose or give up a little bit of pleasure and not to disconnect from Hashem? The answer is because by eating food that's not kosher, he's not disconnecting from Hashem. If he, God forbid, bows down to an idol, or he declares openly that he's going to belong to another religion and wants to convert, he is clearly disconnecting from Hashem. But carrying on Shabbos or eating not kosher or anything else, it's not disconnecting from Hashem. That thought comes from the Ruach Shtus, that he doesn't really recognize and feel what's really happening. And the reason is because at the moment he's overcome with a certain taiva, certain passion, a lust, a desire for some sort of physical pleasure. And when that takes over, it sort of numbs my spiritual sensitivity. But there are klal, generally speaking, mitzad hagbaros hataiva hareshechech legavri alakus. Because the taiva, that desire, that burning desire is so strong that it causes the person to forget, meaning not to be sensitive to godliness. We see this. Not only does a person lose his sensitivity to godliness, he even loses his common sense when he gets very excited about some sort of physical pleasure that he wants to pursue. Shagam sichle mabed, he loses his seichel. Beis hataiba, when he gets the taiba. Shere yasek kama shtusim, we see people do so many foolish things. Until he does what he wants to do for his animalistic pleasure. It appears to him in his head, nobody sees what he's doing. Nobody knows what he's doing, and no one will ever find out what he's doing. And that's why he does what he does. The truth is, he's not really making a correct judgment. And unfortunately, we don't need to prove this because we see this every other day in the news of someone that did something which was very inappropriate, and it was discovered, and now it's very embarrassing, humiliating for him, for his family, for his friends. There's no way to hide himself. So what were you thinking when you did it? And the answer was, I wasn't thinking. He got so involved in his taiva that the brain went out to lunch because he loses his sense of judgment, and how much more so that he loses his sensitivity to ruchnis. Yeah.
How can we be reliable for our actions if it's a rush, just that like we're not?
Because ruch means that there's some sort of external force that comes and takes me over. I'm the one who's allowing the ruch to do that. But I allow myself to get so obsessed and so into this type. In other words, at every point, I do have the free choice to stop myself, but I'm letting myself get so caught up by whatever that is that I'm not thinking. So one of the strong points of the Yetzer Hara is telling a person, don't worry, nobody sees, nobody knows, nobody will ever know what you just did. But the truth is, things are not really that way. They don't remain hidden. It's very possible that someone is seeing him and watching him. If he would have known that someone is watching him and it could leak out what he did, he never would have done it. Like the famous quote from Gemara, the story in Gemara that Yochanan ben Zakkai was in his last moments of his life, and it was he was 120 years old. His students were around his bed, and they saw that he's leaving them, and they begged him to give them a bracha. So he gave him a bracha. The bracha was that your fear of Hashem should be like the fear that you have of other people. And they were shocked and disappointed. That's what you're giving us a bracha? Fear of Hashem should be like fear of people. Fear of Hashem should be so much greater than the fear of other people. But why is that a bracha? So he said it's a real bracha. And he said, because you see, when people do something, they say, I hope nobody's watching me. When they're thinking, I hope nobody's watching me. What the Gemara means to say is, because the fear of Hashem is supposed to be much greater than the fear of another human. And the truth is, it's Hashem, the king of all kings, the creator of the universe, the one who can do whatever he wants and however he wants, and nobody could chas v'sholom control him. But that knowledge that Hashem sees is not as real to me as the knowledge when I actually see another person watching me. In other words, the Gashmias, if you ask, let me just see something about the heat, I don't want to miss it. In other words, if you would ask the average from Jew, I'm talking about somebody who's from, really from davens 3 times a day, tefillin, mezuzah, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, every mitzvah, average from Jew who's really committed, God-fearing Jew, and you ask him the question, is there ever a time that you make a little mistake, you do something wrong, speak a little lashon hara or something else that's really not permissible? And if he's honest, he'll probably say, yes, I'm not a tzaddik, I'm not a beitani. The next question is, do you believe that Hashem is watching you every second? Of course, what kind of question? So if Hashem is watching you, how do you do what you did? Does that mean you don't believe Hashem is watching you? No way. He believes he believes Hashem is watching him. So how is it possible? I know for sure that if a person would be watching me, I wouldn't do it. So how come if Hashem is watching me, that doesn't affect me the same way? And the answer is not because I don't believe, but the belief is sort of removed from me. When there's an actual person of flesh and blood that I can see with my eyes of flesh and blood, and that person, his eyes are looking at me, that is very real to me, and that'll stop me from doing what I want to do. I'll be embarrassed to do it in their presence. The fact that Hashem is watching me, because it's Hashem, and that's something which is not physical, not visual, and I can't sort of see it with my physical eyes, it's distant from me, and as a result of that, it doesn't have the same impact like a physical human being. So therefore, he said to his students, when I give you a bracha, that your fear of Hashem should have the same exact sense of reality, just like you fear another person. That's an amazing bracha. In other words, my awareness and knowledge that Hashem is watching over me is so real, so tangible, and so concrete, as if another human being would be watching me. That's an amazing bracha. So that's the ruch shtus that makes the person not realize this. And that's what he says. In sichlim abis, if a person could lose his seichel, which is just common sense, not something so spiritual, koshkein, certainly, how much more so, shema abed hanita tzalaki shabai, that he loses that godly spark in him, the shechech halakus, and he forgets about the godliness, shema hergesh alaki. At that moment, he loses his sensitivity to godliness. If he would have been sensitive, there's no question that this person, if his awareness and consciousness of Hashem would be real, like the realness of another person, he wouldn't do this. And most people could say that for themselves, even people who are not big tzaddikim, and they do things wrong, and they have things sometimes that get them very excited and they want to do it. But if Hashem would be standing there and I would be aware of his presence, the same way I'm aware of a human presence, I would never do it. And that's the reason why the Eis Min Ha'itim, in times, very sort of special times, when for some reason or other, the light of Hashem shines upon him, which means there are certain times where Hashem makes himself aware to us, makes himself conscious to us more than ordinary times, the time which is called the Eis Ratzon L'mayla. Eis Ratzon means a time where Hashem is more willing to be revealed to us than other times. For example, Aseres Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of Tshuva between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Sha'oz Man Kiruv Hamor El Hanitzos. That's the time that the mor, which means the torch, which is a big fire, comes close to the spark, which is a small fire. Hashem is close to us. You do as it's known. And because Hashem is close to us, I feel his presence more. And then the person feels that if he does this or that, he's far from godliness. In fact, that's why people are aroused to do tshuva in that time, because he feels Hashem's presence, and then he feels more how I'm lacking in my connection. Or sometimes just in the middle of davening, a person is one of those days that the davening just somehow it goes. I feel for some reason or other today the davening is really affecting me. There was once a chassid, he was an older chassid, and he was a very big chassid, to the extent that when he became much older, he could no longer give any classes, he could no longer really be involved with the students like he was before. So the person who was very concerned about this was the man who was in charge of the finances in yeshiva. He wanted to stop paying him a salary. He's not teaching anymore. He can't be involved with the students the way he used to, a little bit, but not the way it used to be. So he wanted to either cut his salary or completely take away the salary. So the Rebbe Rashab said he should pay him the salary just like before. And he said, just for the Bachram to see this person is enough of a reason that he should be paid a salary. That he should be around there, they should see this person who is just so sort of filled and bursting with fear of God and love for Hashem and so on. So this chassid, naturally when you're older, the person is weaker and you can't concentrate the same and the feelings are not the same because you're weak. One day he came running into the yeshiva and he told the Bachram, I saw Tchis HaMesim today. Tchis HaMesim. The dead came back to life. Everyone goes, oh, what is he talking about? And he says, I daven today like in my younger years. That was his Tchis HaMesim. That he became alive again. So there are some times where every person has their days, just like you have your days when your mood is not the greatest. Also, sometimes have days where, for some reason or other, something going on a higher plane is lifting me, and the davening is so. When a person is in that way, he has the schus that from above. That day they give him this gift, sheyargish gedulas Hashem. He should have some more of a feeling of the greatness of Hashem, v'nifloisav, and of Hashem's wonders, mispal ktsas alakus, and he gets even a little bit excited about godliness. As Yochali, is that day could be the day sheyetzim and amidas rois v'maisav aroim. I mean, everyone must have had this experience sometime in their life. But this Shabbos was a Shabbos of sitins, and I was sitting at a Fabrengen, and one of the Bachram brought a group of sitins to a Fabrengen. Doesn't really, I wouldn't have suggested it, but he ended up bringing them there. And one kid gets up, he's 15 years old, and he gets up and said, I never had a Shabbos like this in my life. The excitement, so many Jews together, the inspiration, the passion, the singing. And he said, I made a decision in my mind that from now on, this year, I'm going to put on tefillin 3 times a week. And next year, 4 times a week. And the year after, 5 times a week. What basically happened was he was inspired. He was in a place of Kedusha, and he was inspired. And what happens when you get inspired? There's a feeling in your head and your heart, I want to do something more than I did before. That's what he's saying. Every one of us, if we're davening, and as something happens, and in davening, we get that inspiration, a certain excitement about godliness, so that the person steps out of his midas rois, of the negative character traits, or the negative things that he does, and he wants to change it. In other words, what do we see from this? What we see from this is that the reason that I was not so up to par before is not because I was doing this in spite. I was doing this in defiance of Hashem. I was doing this because I didn't feel Hashem. And the proof is when I do feel Hashem, look how it moves me to do something different. That's the point it's bringing out. You still see this is the key point of this part of the Maimon. Because the main cause, is hara, that I'm doing this negative thing. It's not because I don't care to be disconnected, or in fact, I want to be disconnected. The real reason is gabrus hataiva, because whatever physical pleasure involved is so strong that it takes me over, and shechech alakus, it makes me lose and forget the presence of godliness. I'm not that sensitive to godliness. And that's why, if that's the reason why I'm that way, so the problem, therefore, when there are times, shenisker alalakus, that I become more aware of godliness, it helps me step out of those taivas and do things that right. Because this is the way it affects us. the midas rois, with the negative character traits, that when a person allows themselves to get sort of drawn in and indulge in all sorts of physical pleasures, mitamtim hameir b'halev. This clogs the mind and the heart. Sheine margish because what do I mean it clogs it? Clogs it means that he loses his sensitivity, becomes desensitized to godliness. In other words, just like begashmius, the person, God forbid, becomes numb. I mean, sometimes we do it for a good reason. Person is given anesthesia, they shouldn't feel the pain, but they become numb. And when we're numb, you don't feel pain. You also don't feel anything which feels good, pleasant, soothing. I don't feel anything, numbness. So basically, there's a numbness in Kedusha, a numbness towards godliness. A person could become numb. They don't feel how doing an Avera makes me distant from Hashem. And I don't feel how doing a mitzvah makes me closer to Hashem, just numb to spirituality. What causes that numbness? The indulging in the passion for physical pleasure. How does this even begin? That a person allows himself to get so drawn in and indulge so much in physical, materialistic pleasures that he gets totally sort of swallowed up by it. The main thing is because a lack of concentration and davening. In other words, davening is the time of the day, and the davening is the mitzvah that is supposed to make us more sensitive. We're talking about sensitivity. We have it because we have a neshama, but nevertheless, Hashem gave us a mitzvah that the point of this mitzvah is to develop our sensitivity. And that mitzvah is the mitzvah of davening. That's the time when we develop our awareness and sensitivity and consciousness of Hashem's presence. If a person would really daven the way they should, and think about and meditate on godliness, and the light of Hashem would shine in his head, he would really become aroused with more of an awareness of godliness. Just the fact that he's thinking so much about it eventually would bring him to the point that from the thought it would get to the heart. She is galus, the nevesh kiss. He would feel sort of the light of the nevesh kiss. He wouldn't even have these strong temptations and desires to all the physical materialistic pleasures. There's a quote which comes from the Zohar, Tukva de nafsha, chosha de gufa. He describes the neshama and the guf like a seesaw. When you sit down on this end, goes down, the other side goes up. When that side goes down, this side goes up. What it means spiritually is that if the guf, the physical body, and all its pleasures become very strong, then the neshama and its pleasures become weak. If the guf and all its pleasures, on the other hand, if the neshama and all its pleasures become strengthened because I really immerse myself in that, that weakens the guf and all its pleasures. There's a quote, I'm not sure where the source for this is, they don't bring it in the references here, that the Yetzer Hara is Agdim Tanisa. I think it's from the Gemara. Agdim Tanisa means his argument comes first. He says, I'm first. What does that mean? Basically, when a person is born, we don't really have the Yetzer Tov yet. When does the Yetzer Tov come? So that's bar mitzvah and bas mitzvah. When a girl's bas mitzvah at 12, she gets her Yetzer Tov. And when a boy's bar mitzvah at 13, he gets his Yetzer Tov. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have it at all. Obviously, it must be there, but it's not fully developed until bar mitzvah and bas mitzvah. What about the Yetzer Hara that draws us towards all the physical pleasures in life? Shalom Aleichem, he's there right in the beginning. In fact, there's a pasuk in Mishlei where Shlomo HaMelech talks about the Yetzer Hara and calls him an old, foolish king. You know why he's a king? Because he controls us. Why is he foolish? Because he tells us the nonsense. Why do we call him old, foolish king? So one of the answers that are given is because he's older. He's 13 years older than the Nebuch, than the Yetzer Tov. And that's how we've seen a lot of things, how Esau, he came before Yaakov. The Yetzer Hara comes before the Yetzer Tov. And therefore, he claims, I've been here, and I've have my roots here, and I'm rooted into this spot, and don't come here and now upset what I worked so hard for all these years. So it would appear almost like, how is it even possible that we can overcome the Yetzer Hara when he's been there for so many years before? We call Makkah, he took roots in the body for 13 years. You know how it is when you get used to something. Nevertheless, Hashem gives koyach to the godly soul that it can overcome the animal soul. And the only reason why we don't succeed is because we don't really spend time without davening. The Pnei Heder Aveda B'Tfilah. So that allows the Nefesh Bahamis and its taivas that indulge in Tchila B'Dvarim HaMetorim. First, the Nefesh Bahamis indulges in physical pleasure that's permissible, but indulges in it. And then it comes to things that are not even permissible, and one thing leads to another. So the conclusion here is, there's still a few more lines, but I want to just start at least with Amalek. The conclusion here is that the reason why a person has chesed of klipa, gvura of klipa. Chesed of klipa means like love for things that are inappropriate. Gvura means where a person's getting all intense with anger or hate about something which is appropriate. In other words, the feeling is inappropriate, but hate towards kedusha, or hate towards another person, or hate towards someone that you're supposed to love and respect. All these kind of feelings, they come from the fact that I'm allowing the klipa to take over, and I'm losing my sensitivity to kedusha. But even this person, if he would become aware of godliness, sensitive to godliness, he would change. That's the average person. A mullik is different. What could be different? How's a mullik different? We'll start it and then we'll continue tomorrow. Gimel. However, a mullik mida acheres hoisabai. It's a different style completely. A mullik is a klipa that he knows his creator and he knows his master, but he intentionally wants to rebel against him. In other words, let's take the story of Amalek in the Gashmistic way, the literal sense. Could you say that Amalek wasn't aware that the Jews have Hashem on their side? Could you say Amalek wasn't aware that Hashem could perform miracles that could wipe him away in 1 second? He was aware of everything. And remember, he is the one that lived in that time, this nation, and they heard and they saw how Egypt, the superpower of the world, was plagued with plagues upon plagues upon plagues, and then miracles upon miracles. So he saw Hashem openly. So he can say that the reason why he attacked us was a lack of awareness of Hashem. There couldn't be a greater awareness of Hashem than the awareness in those days when Hashem revealed himself in such a powerful way. So what was it? He knows his creator and he knows his master, but he just wants to rebel against him, which means even if he would know more about Hashem, it wouldn't make a difference. That's not his issue. He wants to rebel against godliness. And he's going to conclude, which we'll finish off tomorrow, that therefore there's no way of elevating him. All the other klipas you elevate by the fact that I become more aware of Hashem, and that turns me around. But what if that's not the issue? That you have all the awareness and you still go Hashem because you just want to go against godliness. That's a different kind of klipa. And the only way you can deal with this klipa is by totally eliminating it. So we're going to explain what it means in literally and what it means on a personal level within ourselves. We continue.
Can I ask for a volunteer to take a small feeder down to Rabbi Majeski's office?